I think with a lot of alcoholics, we tend to be what we call a skin too few. So we tend to be oversensitive to situations that occur in our lives, and that could be external factors as well, things that are going on in the world. So when you realise that there's nothing you can do about certain issues, then you can become frustrated. That frustration can turn to irritation, anger, resentment.
When you say there's things that you can't change with certain issues, do you mean within drink? You can't change within yourself?
No, within life. I mean, life is unfair, for most people. There's a lot of injustice in the world, and if you have a strong sense of fair play, which is part of your character, and there are issues that you have no control over, then you can feel frustrated by that. Whether that's it could be anything, effectively, but the frustration creates within. Unfortunately, again, life doesn't come with a handbook, so I never really knew, like most people, I'm not peculiar in any regard, but I didn't know how to deal with it effectively. I was never taught. They never taught me in school how to deal with anger or even to identify resentment. The injustice in the world was a concern for me, as it is for lots of people. But in drink, that feeling comes out. It can be expressed as in physical ways. Whereas when you're sober, you have control. You have elements of control. The behaviour is not as wild sober as it is in alcohol, because it knocks out your inhibitions. So it's like I said, I never had an anger management problem. Whatever frustrations I had, I was able to get through the day, get through life. Yeah, I'd be irritable. Things would bother me, but they never became violence. I didn't go around hitting people because I couldn't get my own way. But in alcohol, when your inhibitions go out the window, those internal frustrations and feelings become exaggerated, and then they manifest in ways that don't happen when you're sober. So I needed to understand that being angry was a normal human emotion, but that it needed to be dealt with in an appropriate way. So I channeled my frustration into sport. Because for me, I couldn't just talk about it. Anger for me was a very tangible energy. I couldn't just talk that away. Talk therapy for anger for me never worked. I needed to release it, and I found martial arts was the way that worked for me. Many people run marathons, they do tennis.
Gave you some kind of discipline, right? My brother is a boxer.
Yeah, boxing. Sure.
He's disciplined.
Absolutely. I mean, that you can channel this energy out in a very constructive way, and then you're not hurting no one. You're creating out of it. But in my time, nobody ever talked about these sorts of things. It was. This is something I've learned in recovery. This is something I've had to take on measures not to relapse back into drinking. Because although the craving's gone, like I said, that was removed, life still tempts you with a drink. Now that's, I have to explain that there's a massive difference. We're talking chalk and cheese. Craving is something completely different. The temptation, that can be managed. Craving can't. I mean, they're two separate things. I could never control the craving, but that was removed from me. But the urge, circumstances, situations can prompt somebody into running back into a drink. It's an escape. So I had to learn other ways. I had to identify situations that would encourage me to want to pick up another drink. Realize, be aware, and apply alternative approaches to dealing with issues. As I said, for me, very effective way of dealing with that pent-up energy, that frustration, life frustration. I mean, you could get a bill could fall on the floor, an unexpected bill, or the car could break down, and you'd have expense, because like everybody, finances were always at their max, and the next little thing that came in was always just a step too far.
You must have spent a lot of money on that, the addiction.
Oh God, yeah. Well, they reckon, well, getting into recovery, is the most expensive club in the world. They reckon, it takes a fortune really to get into recovery for most people, but before you realise that you're in a bad way. I was very conscientious about my work. I would go to the nth degree to protect the public. And I was working I was a health officer, and there were people who had problems with noise. In one of the valleys in Glenavon, there was a property next to a pub. And the pub was a traditional old mining type, but the new owners had taken over, and they wanted to have live music. And the poor couple next door was an elderly couple. They couldn't even listen to the television. So I would go up, out of hours after 11, 12 o'clock at night and listen. So I would go the extra mile to protect the vulnerable. Yeah. So I had a very keen sense of justice. I'd been in the police as a young man, exactly the same. It stemmed from all of that. So I was doing a lot of work. I was also studying for a master's degree in public health, and I'd finished. I had to resubmit my dissertation because an external examiner had failed it. There's a story there, but
did you, Tim?
No, but basically what it meant was I was under a lot of stress. I was under a lot of pressure. Some people cope with it. I thought I coped with it. I now know that I wasn't good at coping with stress. My way of coping with stress was to drink, because that gave me that doorway to instant peace of mind, instant calm. And what happened was, I was looking after a student, so I had loads of work going on. I was doing my masters in the evenings as well, and that was going on for 2 years. I was having to redo the dissertation, and I got to the point where I went into the office, and my desk was full of work, and I panicked because there was no room to even put a paperclip. So I took the student, and we went out, and we did visit or two, and then when I got back and went into the office, more work had been put on my seat. So there was nowhere to sit, there was nowhere to turn, and it was sheer drown. I drowned. I felt I was swamped.
Yeah.
And I just had to escape. So I kind of ran out from there, went home. Of course, what's my answer to everything? Hit the bottle, have a drink, chill it out. And I don't. That resentment, that frustration, that injustice that I felt internally transmuted into aggression. And then something snapped, and I drove back like a lunatic, stormed into the office, and I just, with one punch, punched the manager, and everybody else, were in shock. And then it seemed to last for ages, but it couldn't. It must have been over in a minute or two.
Yeah.
And then I stormed back out, down the lift. I think I said a couple of words to a counsellor. As you do.
Yeah.
I was never one for authority really, and I stormed out and I never went back there ever again. Well, I was out of work for a year or so after that incident. Again, I channeled frustration and anger into digging in the back garden. All of that's in there. I've written all about that in the book. So when I recognised that there was this destructive energy, because of this injustice, and then I channeled it. I channeled it into appropriate ways, constructive ways. So I was never destructive. I've always been creative, but whenever I've had to cope with injustice and there's been a bottleneck of this type of thing, and I drink, it comes out in ways that I would never have imagined.
Yeah.
My downfall was my predilection for ethanol. So it didn't matter where I went, what I did. I was at sea, struggling to stay afloat. I needed to stay afloat, or I was going to drown. But alcohol was dragging me under. So there was this battle all the time. We staying afloat, trying to survive, do the right thing, and I was constantly being pulled down by the craving for ethanol.
Yeah.
And it was like going into a ring with Mike Tyson. I'd get knocked down, and then I'd get up again, and I'd wipe myself down and think, blimey, that was a tough one. I'd get back in the ring again, trying to do the right thing, and I get knocked down again, and it was a never-ending battle. And I'm no different. I've heard hundreds of stories with people from all professions, of all backgrounds, that have the same battle. And these are not people on park benches. This is not a park bench or a brown paper bag inside. These are, really ahead of their game, and yet they cannot control ethanol. Once the craving kicks in, and as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not prevalent. At least 1 in 4, 1 in 16. Forget the 1 in 100 that's out there at the minute. They try to encourage people, reassure people that it's not a problem. 1 in 100 of the adult effect. That's rubbish. And I can give you some reasons why statistically that's rubbish, but I've got time at this minute. But it's far more prevalent than that. And people are struggling out there, and especially with stress. I mean, we live in a world, especially in the UK, there's so much pressure on everybody these days to be pulling more than their weight. Staff have been cut back in pretty much every profession, and those that are left have to cover and do more work. You can see it in the NHS; they're rushed off their feet. No wonder addiction is high amongst the medical profession, and it's the same with the ambulance service. I mean, they do phenomenal jobs. So stress, those people are going through enormous amounts of stress, and alcohol is, unfortunately, is up there as a means of coping with it, and it's a foolish means of coping with anything.
Yeah.
There are no answers in the bottom of a bottle or a glass. I do know that 50% of assaults are alcohol related. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's mad. It's the same with domestic disputes. 1 in 3 divorces alcohol related. Domestic violence.
People are unaware of this.
Yeah, again, because they're writing off situations. Like I said, I've already mentioned it, but people are not attributing their alcohol consumption with crap that's going on in their lives. And that's why my work, my resource, hopefully will change that.